This issue of integrity and competing with integrity and finding ways to inject intercollegiate sport with integrity is, I think, is the single most important topic in front of us in collegiate sport. And somewhat interestingly, it's been that way for the 110-year history of the association. When the association was created, back in the very first parts of the 20th century, it was predominantly because of the same exact concerns that exist today. It was about, first and foremost, student safety. Back then, of course, all the student athletes were, well, first of all, they weren't all students. All the athletes were males, and they were predominantly playing football and a handful of other sports, baseball and rowing and some other things. But the health and welfare of student athletes was, to say the least, shockingly at risk. 1904, 19 boys, young men, were killed playing football. There were a tiny fraction of the number of participants then that there are today, so at today's participation rates it'd be 10 or 15 times that. So imagine if this year 190 kids were killed playing football, the kind of response that would have created. And then the second one was a concern about the over-commercialization of college sport. Now, can you imagine that? In 1895, they were worried about the over-commercialization of college sport. But you have to flash back to the beginning of that last century when there weren't professional sports, and the largest sports that people attended were college sport activities. Harvard, Yale would get 85,000 people to come to the game. Easily the biggest sporting event going on in the country then, other than maybe horse racing. And in that same time frame, a young entrepreneurial manager of the football team raised the ticket price for the Princeton-Yale game from 25 cents to 50 cents. Doubled the price for the tickets for that one game. Now you think 50 cents, who cares? You roll back in real dollars and bring that forward, and I've got to actually do the calculation, but I suspect that made those tickets way over $100 in current dollars, given inflation rates. So all of a sudden it was a very, very expensive ticket. By the way, the entrepreneurial manager who did that was Woodrow Wilson, who went on to become president of the United States, so it didn't hurt his popularity. But it created a furor, and so you had concerns about safety, you had concerns about commercialization, but throughout all of it was this overwhelming concern that college sports, as it was evolving back then, was going to destroy the integrity of higher education. That the two things were irreconcilably being jammed together. Charles Eliot, the president of Harvard University, was president for 35 years, arguably the most powerful and most influential person in college education in American history. All 35 years he tried to kill college sports. He made it his mission to kill college football, because he believed that the two things could not be jammed together without destroying the integrity of the academic culture. He failed, thank goodness. But nonetheless, when you read the headlines today, when you look at what's going on today, you hear three things. Concern about the health and welfare of our young men and women, concern about over-commercialization, and the erosion of integrity around college sports. What does that really mean for all of our campuses? The association was created 100 years ago to battle with all of those issues, and obviously we've done very, very well in the first. The health and well-being of our student athletes has never been better. Their success on the field is remarkable. The quality of the support that they get from all of our programs is extraordinary, and the rate of injury has moved, despite the attention that it gets today, has moved down pretty sharply. And while we have real concerns about things like concussions, all of a sudden you realize that we're doing a much better job there. NCAA has always been at the forefront of that and will continue to do so. When you look at the question of integrity and the erosion of the academic environment, you get some interesting results, right? You see, on the one hand, that student athletes have never done better in the classroom, at least as long as we've been recording their performance. They've never done better in the classroom than they do right now. Student athletes at all three divisions, men and women, majority and minority students, all have higher graduation rates today than they did before, and all, at virtually every campus in the country, have higher graduation rates than the student body at large. So the whole notion that athletics somehow deteriorates the performance of the students who are student athletes is just a fallacy. Utterly not true. We have issues that we need to deal with, and we're working hard on those, but nonetheless, it's significantly better than it has ever been in recent history. But at the same time, you wind up with scandals about admissions, you wind up with scandals about academic support structure, about the nature of courses that students are taking and the clustering of students in various majors, et cetera, et cetera. We all know those storylines that cause the general public and even many of us to say, where's the notion of integrity here? What's going on? Is this, again, this whole notion of competitive sport competing with or eroding integrity inside the academy? When we look at the perceived level of rule breaking that goes on, we say, what does this really mean for the notion of integrity? And we've lost integrity. When we see horrific events, like those that occurred at Penn State, we say, obviously, sport and integrity are colliding with each other once again. All of those issues, some of which, of course, came after last summer, the summer before last, were on our minds when we brought together a little over 50 university presidents, Division I presidents, but I also asked Division II and III presidents who chair those boards to join us when we talked about what we needed to do to reform the nature of Division I rules and structure to make improvements. And we came out of that conversation, as you know, and I've talked to you before about, with really two concerns. The first being the notion that student athletes have to be students, real students. So we bumped up the initial eligibility requirements, and those are working their way through the system right now, and I'm very pleased with where that's going. And then we added in new performance requirements to be eligible for postseason play, so that in order to participate in any postseason play in Division I now, you don't have to simply be eligible on the court or on the field, you have to be eligible in the classroom, and that's having an immediate impact right now. We will see this year schools who will not participate in bowl games or tournaments of any kind or go to the big dance or any of those things, not because they're not undefeated, but because they don't have enough academic performance in the classroom. That's a really good thing. Coaches are being very attentive to that. They're watching, they're following along very closely with the changes that are going on in initial eligibility requirements, and I think we're in very good shape in terms of that side of the equation. The flip side of the other side of the equation then was this whole notion of integrity, that we needed to change the rule book, simplify the rule book, focus on those things that are real threats to integrity, that really undermine the inherent integrity of college sport, and then also put in place a new set of enforcement mechanisms, both in the way we define infractions and the way we can manage those infractions, the way we adjudicate those infractions, and the penalty structures that really focus on the threats to integrity for the game. Those, the latter half of that package, the enforcement package, will go in front of the D1 board at the end of this month, in just a couple of weeks. Unless something very unusual happens between now and then, I suspect it will pass, and it will probably pass with great support because it's been vetted with the membership extremely well. A number of you in the room here have been a part of that process, and it's very exciting to see, and I think it's going to bring about a lot of changes. And then on the rules side, we have a lot of work going on right now. We just circulated, I guess a week or so ago, Joan, the first pass coming out of the Rules Working Group that's being chaired by James Barker, the president of Clemson, that the membership's now getting a look at. We're going to bring it back, look at it at the October meeting, but then also bring it back to a January meeting at the National Convention and have a lot of discussion then. And the hope is to have action on the first tranche of this work in April or August at the very latest. But we need to get a lot of feedback on where we're going with those rules.
Good morning. First, I have to confess, Julie asked me if I were an athlete, and I had to say, no, I'm just home. So my experience with college athletics is of a fairly short duration, but intense. As you've heard, I've been at the University of Kansas for 3 years, and prior to that, I was at North Carolina. And I also have to confess that until I was Dean of Arts and Sciences, I did not go to athletic events. Continued to, after I was Dean, continued to do that while I was Dean and Provost, of course. But all of that changed when I came to University of Kansas and had, as any university president and chancellor, really a significant involvement in athletics, which I have always understood and certainly understand now to be an important part of the university. I think that athletics serves in a way to, not only for the training and experiences it provides the students, but is a way of tying the students and alumni to the university in a way that I don't know, is very difficult to do the same kind of, have the same kind of allegiance without athletics. We're talking about winning and integrity in athletics, and I want to say that I think the issue of integrity in athletics is just a special case of integrity in higher education, but in a number of areas, certainly some of the things that have happened in the last few years, as there has been a focus on end-of-the-year testing in K through 12 public schools. We've had a number of reports of schools and whole school systems sending in false reports of students' performance, or actually changing the responses that students made on tests so that the school will look better. So the school will look better, the teachers will look better, the administrators will look better. About 3 weeks ago, if you read the Chronicle of Higher Education, there was a report of a number of universities, including some very high prestige public and private universities, who sent in data to U.S. News and World Report on the admissions criteria or admissions characteristics of their students that were exaggerated, or they left out some students so that the scores would look higher and they would therefore get a higher ranking on U.S. News and World Report. Whenever we have a situation where everything depends on looking good and winning, I think we have a temptation to have people, regardless of what kind of institutions, cut corners. And so I think the struggle is, and Mark said this earlier, how do we make not only winning, but winning the right way and doing things in the right way as important as the winning itself? How is it that we create that expectation and the culture that it will be done, that winning will be done, that playing will be done with integrity? And that applies to student athletes, and it applies to students generally, and it applies to the faculty and staff throughout the university. I was, as I mentioned before, at the University of North Carolina. You have probably heard over the last couple of years of the problems that have been experienced there with students' performance in classes, perhaps bogus classes, bogus performance. One of the things that's very striking about that to me, so University of North Carolina has a reputation for having a clean athletic program. It's talked about, it's bragged about. In one of the positions that I held there, the person who was responsible for the support of student athletes, academic support, reported to a person who reported to me. All of the things that were going on there were unknown to me, and so it was just startling that there was so much faculty involvement in that. So it's really been a very sobering experience to hear about it, and all the people involved and know how far we can go astray. Having heard that and read about that, so I've been talking to the head of our University of Kansas, the head of our academic support program, and say, tell me what we're doing, assure me that we're doing this in the right way. And I think that So focus on integrity is important. A continuous program of examining what you're doing, making sure that you're doing it right, but the expectation of integrity as a way of bringing students in, bringing faculty in, I think is something that has to be there because you cannot do it by checking 100 rules and following people every day. It has to be part of what they expect to do, part of what they want to do, and I think that's the only way to change the culture.
Good morning, and I want to say welcome to Kansas City, especially the NACWA that's housed here with great leaders like Patty that contributes not only to our community, but obviously on a national level. We're really grateful that you are here. Also want to mention that Kansas City is home of the MIAA conference. Our commissioners here, Bob Richter, Amber Feldman, our SWA, and Bob would really get after me if I didn't mention it's the 100th anniversary of the MIAA, so I want to make sure I get that plug. And I want to thank NACWA for being included with Mark and Chancellor Gray, because for me, integrity in intercollegiate athletics is a personal issue. I'm very indebted to college sports because of the experience of being able to be a student athlete out of the sport of soccer, not necessarily known as the highest degree of integrity at all times in regards to maybe game environment, and this is more on a global level. And at the same time, very personally indebted because my wife was a student athlete at Furman University and a direct beneficiary of Title IX, and the fact that she was the first full scholarship that Furman gave in women's golf. And she was right at that time of change when she actually had the opportunity to play in an AIAW championship and an NCAA championship the same year. And so when people talk about integrity in college sports, I actually take it personally, that there's a sense that perhaps as a former student athlete or perhaps an administrator, that integrity is being called into question, or we're the beneficiaries of great role models and mentors who made us a little different because of our opportunity to compete in college athletics. And so we're very grateful, and especially the NACWA. My wife and I were talking about it last night before coming down here this morning. And you know, at Furman, we didn't have a lot of great role models that were women in sports, leaders in sports, in, I'm not going to mention the year, 1979. But look now, today, you know, we point to our conferences, we point to our institutions, and the roles that you play in the emergence. It's really exciting to see not only where we've come, but also where we can go and what's possible. Now, I also realize I'm on this panel for one specific purpose, and that's to say, I believe Division II has it right. And I only say that because, without question, and if we were sitting with your presidents and your other senior administrators on your campuses, there's no question that intercollegiate athletics requires somewhat of a transcendent message of all of the issues that Mark and the NCAA are challenged with on a daily basis, because from policymakers and certainly state governments and donors and parents and prospective students, the real question today is all about student success. You know, are we giving access to college? Are we helping students complete college? Is there the kinds of experiences that make them whole in who they are and what they become? And without question, highest degree of participation in college sports this year, all of the elements that Mark outlined in regards to graduation rates. We're not reactive or defensive in terms of the role of college sports. You are part of the solution to demonstrating the degree of value. And really, I want to thank my D2 colleagues, and you're going to recognize one at lunch tomorrow, that I believe has really been a great role model and mentor for many within Division II. But over the last decade, there's been really three key learnings that I've taken away that I think we're required to look forward with in terms of integrity. The first is we really have to heighten a sense of destination in terms of college sports. That's people, purpose, and really the means by which you have a North Star. Now, at NACWA, you have a set of mission and value statements that are a North Star. You talk about empowerment and advocacy, the kind of mentoring, the degree of focus on student success, the lifting of people up, that would really be a great North Star for any institutional set of missions in regards to who you are and what you do. The second aspect that it really requires us to have is an alignment of all that we do. Because as soon as one circumstance, one aberration, one thing that's beyond our control happens, people call our integrity into question, and it gets to be a real sense of perhaps despair, and then we go into our defensive mode rather than kind of being proactive and demonstrating the value of college sports and what it means to our institutions. And the last is it creates a real sense of value for our students. There is so much change. The pace of change within higher ed is happening at such a rapid rate that this value proposition, there's no greater demonstrated value to students in terms of the co-curricular return on the investment that students make in time, energy, and resources, that it is an amplifier, of purpose for our institutions. In regards to integrity, I think if I were playing offense, I would say we all have to start earlier. We have to drive harder with collaborations and partnerships which underline the integrity of college sports and its meaning to the academy. We have to assume responsibility for it ourselves. We all have to be encouragers at every level. And we need to look for those that are doing it right. And I know that's one of the things we may talk about a little bit as we move forward. But without question, I think NACWA plays a very vital role in this conversation of creating destination alignment and value can't happen without you. And then how can we find, as Mark said, the means by helping each other do it in a way that makes college sports not one of those issues of challenge, but a real critical part of the solution for the challenge that's, and we've got a lot of headwinds, don't we, as a society, as a culture, and even within the academy. And again, college sports is one of those means by which we move things forward at a different pace with a different reason and a different purpose.
I feel like Jim Blair, so I'm going to come over and thank you, I will. Dr. Harris, that's really a perfect segue. Would each of you comment just a little bit, as you look out, my colleagues here, 500 or 600 of them, this group, as you know, ranges from the top CEOs of major intercollegiate athletic programs to many young women just getting started in this field that really want to, as you take pride, they want to make an impact, and they want to make a difference for student athletes. And so can we drill down just a little bit? You have the opportunity to talk with them. And what are things just that you would hope that our conference commissioners, that our athletic directors, our SWAs and others working, that they would like to do day to day? What are the kinds of things that you would ask of them? Is it their hiring practices? Is it professional development that we put in place? But what is going to help as you operate at that 50,000 foot level to really come behind and help this culture change?
Well, I'll take a first stab at it. and I want to connect with something that Bernadette said, because I think it's exactly right, and that is that integrity in intercollegiate athletics is just a special case of integrity. I mean, there's nothing unusual about the nature of integrity inside college sport. But what we have done in intercollegiate athletics is we have taken comfort, and to some extent I'm contending it's false comfort, in these tightly defined rules that we put in place. We know that we can have in place all the rules and all the guidelines, but if the core values of the enterprise and the behavior of individuals is antithetical to promoting integrity, it won't matter. You can have all the right, have taken all the right actions in terms of compliance officers and in terms of your review systems, in terms of a variety of things, but if you're not staying on top of and paying great attention to the behavior of folks, as we all say when no one's watching, then you can overcome all of those things. And I think we need to have in our training and our development and the way we go about thinking about college sports some of the same kind of conversations that we have around other parts of the academy and other parts of life, around what it means to have integrity in our processes and what our values are and how we're adhering to those values on an individual basis. The biggest difference about the special case of college sport and why this conversation is so important to university presidents is that typically when there's an academic fraud issue or a loss of integrity around academics, it doesn't make the front page. If the issue at Carolina, an extraordinary university, I mean one of the greatest universities in the world, if the issue of academic misconduct or whatever was going on there had not involved student athletes, we'd never be talking about it. It would have happened on campus. You'd have dealt with it through disciplinary process. You'd have dealt with the faculty and the students in some appropriate fashion. But because it involves some players, the whole country's talking about it. Harvard, of all places, right, has had a debate. I don't know what all the facts are there, but they've had a debate at Harvard about academic integrity.